All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining another fabulous Money Monday. As always, we have some great speakers to give us some great gems about how we can approach our fire journey. So, regardless if you're planning to retire early or you just want some financial independence, that you could if you wanted to, or maybe you just simply need a break, which, after being in quarantine for almost a year, that might be a bunch of us. So on today, we have Roshida D, who is a passionate proponent of career breaks. Whew, Lord. Sabbaticals and grown-up gap years. Back in the day, she used to be a lawyer. She practiced for about a decade before she realized she wasn't in love with the life she built. And I think a lot of us are in that, should we do a career change? Should we just change something altogether? Should we just shut it down for a minute? And so she was stressed, tired, and burnt out. I think so many of us can relate to that. And then she knew she needed to make a change. So she took a leap and decided to travel the world for a year. And I know some people are like having heart palpitations just thinking about that. She quickly realized that she wanted other women to experience the freedom that she found in her career break. So she started coaching women looking to leave burnout behind and how to plan satisfying and sustainable breaks from their careers. And so, ladies, I know so many of us are in that same situation. We're thinking about what next, how long can we sustain this lifestyle? And so, thank you so much, Sheeta, for being with us today. And just tell us a little bit about how you did it and how we can too.
Okay. My story is kind of a weird one. Let me get to my talking points because I will forget something. Even like I had to write down my intro, but here I am. I was working at Uber. I was one of their lawyers. I was working for a company they owned. Same everything, same cafeteria, same HR people, same everything, but technically a different company. And that company went out of business in April 2018, but they knew they were going out of business in October 2017. But I knew they were going out of business in like a month after I started, in like May of 2016. So I spent 2 years at a company that I pretty much knew from the beginning when I got there that their model wasn't sustainable. They were new to the industry they were in, and I had been around for a while. And while there was no one thing to point at, there was a lot of consistent business practices that I was like, in the long run, you're not gonna make money like this. I'm here for the ride and the check. And because I moved though, like I moved to the Bay Area, which was really expensive to do the job. And so I definitely wasn't going anywhere. That's how my career break started. I got laid off and I made the decision to travel uh, instead of getting another job. And I traveled for a year before I settled back down in Mexico City. But my fire journey started, I don't know, it started with a layoff. It started with a layoff in 2009. I was working for a law firm and they let go 20% of their associates one day. Like one day, it was back, if you remember 2009, if you remember lots, like, whew, it was a rough time. I was doing real estate financing, commercial real estate financing for banks. And as you can imagine, 2009, banks weren't lending money to companies to fund real estate, to buy or to do construction. So there was nothing for me to do. And so, like in January, the law firm had a meeting and said, we would never lay any of you off, your family, we're going to stick through this together. And in the beginning of February, they were like, so 2 weeks from now, don't come back. It's like, I thought, you know what? I'm not even going. There's no need to have a conversation. Thank you. God bless. Um, and so it was 2009. And because I'd been practicing for a couple of years, my sole experience was as a commercial real estate attorney. It was hella hard to get a job because no one was doing the work and no one was hiring people to do the work. So I spent about 6 months scared out of my mind, worried about, I moved to Ohio in 2006. So it was 2.5 years into a 30-year mortgage. Not sure I was going to pay it. I had been living the lawyer life with the expenses that came with it. Racked up some credit cards. And I just wasn't sure. I spent a lot of time scared about my financial future. Like, am I going to have money to pay these bills? I don't know, so let me cut the cable. Like, that's how I got through 6 months. And after 6 months, I got a temp job. I was working at BMW at their operation center in Ohio, and I proved very invaluable to them because your girl is good at what she does. And they asked me to stay, and I was there for 7 years after that. And during those 7 years, once I got the chance to get my finances back on track, I really doubled down on not having debt. Like, that was, I think, I'm not going to say the number one priority in my life, but it was a really big priority. So I never got cable again. Like, the things I cut down when I was unemployed, those things never came back. For the most part. Like, I started to do things like travel again. Like, when I was unemployed, like, I missed a couple weddings because I was like, I can't plan to go to your wedding when I don't know. I don't know how to pay my mortgage. I think I have a plan to pay my mortgage, but if things change, if any kind of hiccup happens, there is no emergency fund, or not one big enough for a large emergency. So that was back in 2009, and I'm sure FIRE was a concept back then, but it wasn't something that I heard talked about widely. And so I started working. I didn't realize I was working on early retirement, and I didn't realize I was working on this thing called financial independence. I just know that I hated debt. And so I paid off my car. I paid off my house in I want to say 7 or 8 years. But I was living in Ohio, and I bought a really cheap, my friends all had these big mansions, and I had a tiny little house that was hood adjacent. Hood adjacent, the closest bank to me, which was a couple blocks away, you could get dollar bills out of the ATM. Dollar bills. That's how. That was the only bank in the neighborhood where you get dollar bills out. I felt safe. It was a cute house, but I wasn't living the lifestyle that a lot of my peers were. And I had made that choice before I even moved to town because I didn't want a lump house. My realtor was like, they approved you for this much, but don't do that. She was like, don't. And once I got laid off, I was like, oh, that was her advice to not take out the whole amount I could get approved for. Really saved me because I wouldn't have been able to pay my mortgage if I had gotten that loan originally. But I got a really small loan. To be transparent, I think my mortgage was at the end when I had paid off PMI, it was $611 a month, $611 a month. Yeah, but I went out of my way to get a house that was very affordable, that I could pay multiple times a month. So for my first, when I was paying it off, I paid multiple house payments, 2 or 3. Some months it was 3 payments. Just take this money. And at the same time, I was paying off my student loans because while I was team defer them as long as I can, I had a lot sitting over my head, and I knew I wanted to be completely out of debt. And if I wasn't completely out of debt, I wouldn't have gone on the career break that changed my life. I know myself, and I would have, even though I recommend to people who I work with that they can always, I don't recommend you quitting your job to travel the world if you have, credit card debt or mortgage you got to pay, unless you have that money stacked up ready to pay. But if if you know that it's just student loans, I tell people not to let student loans stop them. But I know student loans would have stopped me. I wouldn't have gone. I would have felt like I need to do the responsible thing, which is often what I see holding a lot of Black women back from living their dreams, is carrying the community on their back, doing the responsible thing, being responsible for themselves and for other people. And so for me, my career break was a time of okay, I get to do this just for me. And my financial journey was a time of, this is my priority. I don't have anyone else to take care of. So if I pay off my debt, I'll be in a really good position to do whatever I want. I didn't know what whatever I want looked like. I have been saving for retirement at every single job I've had that had any kind of 401k I could open, any kind of anything, whether they matched or not. I've been saving since I was 18. And I'm 41 now, I'll be 42 in May. And so there has not been a time where I was not saving for my retirement. And so all of those things lined up, or when I got laid off, it was like, oh no, I have to find a job. And then the idea of traveling for a while came up. And I was like, let me check some accounts. Let me see some numbers. I don't have to go to work. Like I don't like, and that was the freedom that came to me from even when I didn't expect it to come, even when I didn't know what paying off my debt and being focused with my money was going to do. That is the freedom that came from that. So for me, it's been a long journey. Like I said, I've been saving since I was 18 for retirement. I don't know that I never sat down and calculated a fire number and said, I will be able to retire at this number or at this age. I just said at one point, this is how much money I have. I cannot work. And then because most of my money is in the market, it's kind of like, as long as it keeps doing good, as long as the market keeps performing, you're not gonna see me again. But I've always told myself that if there's a crash, I can always go back to work. I always have skills. But I've been really cautious about using the money I have to put myself first in the regards of time. But we have not talked about what we are here to talk about, which is living better on less abroad. I'm in Mexico City. All of that to say that I'm in Mexico City. I have been here for less than a month, but I lived here for 6 months in 2019 after I took my career break. I chose Mexico City because it's not super cheap, but there are many cheaper cities to live in Mexico. It's probably like the cost of living equivalent of maybe a Midwest town, probably a little cheaper than when I lived in Columbus, but not significantly as far as like housing goes, as far as housing I would live in goes. But it's like being in New York on Columbus prices. Like it's a world-class city. It's a great city. I'm really glad to be here. When we're on a lockdown now because of COVID, and so everything is closed. But when things are open, there are a ton. There are more museums than I think London, or one of the big European cities. Or more than one of the big European cities. We've got more museums than them. There's a ton of things to do. There are always people here. There's a great community here. There's a great Black expat community here. And so one of the things I learned when I traveled on my career break was that almost every city I went to outside of the US was cheaper than living in the US. The people enjoyed life more. I felt safer overall, and I felt I didn't have that lingering fear of police that I do in the US. And so once you leave the US and see what you can live like abroad, for me, it was very hard to move back to the US. I know everyone is kind of feeling the stress this week, but to live in a place where people are just like this wild over election results and like don't think you should have rights because of your skin color. I'm not saying that other countries are perfect. I'm saying that I personally find more peace in other countries where I don't have Americans in my face all day. Like Americans who don't want me to prosper in my face all day. Like I prefer my days like this. So Yeah, that was a lot. I hope I answered your one question in that like 15 minutes.
Now you did bring up like racism, and in reality, that's I just finished reading the book Caste, and they
Mhm.
talked about like middle class African Americans have more stress than even poverty stricken just because of the racism and kind of the preventative measures of you hitting that next plateau in your career and so forth. What
Mhm.
are your experiences in Mexico in dealing with anything like racism?
I talked about this on my YouTube channel this weekend with Adelia, who's here right now. And one of the things that came up for me and came up for her is that there's a fine line between racism and classism here, or colorism and classism here, and it's often hard to know whether someone's reaction to it's very rare that someone has what I consider a negative reaction or a negative reaction that I notice. And if it does happen, it's hard to know if it's because they are extremely wealthy and so they think like everyone is below them, or whether it's because they see my brown skin and so they're treating me like this. Of course, as a foreigner, I do get a little bit of privilege, and the flip side of that of the classism is there as well. I think some people treat me better because they think I have American money than they might treat an Afro Mexican. Um, and so there's that fine line of knowing why someone is treating you that way. I often don't think about it. If you're an asshole, you're just an asshole. It doesn't really matter to me why you're doing this. Um, and there is racism here, but it's the kind of thing that you don't typically run into day to day. But I also don't typically I'm in my apartment doing work most of the day. I go to the grocery store, I take Ubers. I'm not typically having like long conversations with people of Mexican descent. And it's not that I'm trying to isolate myself. We are in lockdown, so there's not a lot of opportunities to have these interactions, good or bad.
Now, Marie says, what's dating like in Mexico?
I don't know. I lived here for 6 months and went on one date, but and he was foolish. My mom was watching this. Hey, mom. Um, the I'm very bad at online dating in that I'll go on the app and have like that like intro conversation with someone and then not get back on the app for like 3 weeks. And so that it's died and I got to start over with new people and all. So that was, and I think apps are, because I don't speak Spanish fluently, I think apps are probably a good way for me and other people who are in my same situation to go. The other thing is that when you're from a different culture than someone, the way they approach you sometimes may not seem like they're doing the thing they're doing. Like one time, a guy on a street started talking to me, and I swear to you, he was either trying to push me in a van or hit on me. And I will never know which one it was because I was like, I'm uncomfortable. He asked me like 7 questions in a row, like, hey, what do you do? What's your name? What are you doing here? Who are you with? How long have you been here? And I was like, I don't, and it was all like, boom, boom, boom. I don't know. I think you're flirting, but I'm not sure. And I gotta walk away because you could be trying to kidnap me. It's just too much information. And so I recognize that there's like a cultural thing as well, which has pushed me towards the apps. But like I said, it's a pandemic. Like I'm not even on them because what are we gonna do? Like literally people here, it's so locked down that people here are like, when I see people in Facebook groups meeting up, it's like, hey, we can go to a park and take a walk. And I don't have it in me to put on clothes to meet a man in a park and walk. We can't even go sit down and get coffee anywhere except the park. Like get coffee to go and go to the park. I will tell you how dating is when the pandemic is over. Until then, I have no answers because I'm not even trying.
Well, Kathy asked a really good question, and this is, I guess, more on brand with actually being prepared. She said, "Are there any Mexican banks that are also located in the United States, or I guess maybe even vice versa, United States banks that are also located in Mexico?"
One of the banks in Bank of America has that international banking network where they treat these foreign banks like they're US banks. And one of the banks in their banking network is here, but there are no cross-border banks that I know, that I'm aware of. It's like Santander. Actually, HSBC is here, but HSBC isn't everywhere in America, since it's, I think, mostly like Europe. And then some other, may have seen one Chase here, but I don't remember for sure. I use Charles Schwab, and just their no fee, their fee-free ATM cards. And so I can go to any bank and get my money out of the account, out of a local ATM, and Charles Schwab will refund me that bank's ATM fees, and they won't charge me a fee. And so for people who travel a lot, I really recommend Charles Schwab. I cannot think of any banks that are big in the US and big here as well.
So I may be saying your name horribly wrong. Marshall says, is there a decent people of color or female expat community in Mexico City? Looking at Puerto Morales or Progreso?
I don't know. I know Mexico City has a decent one. I don't know about Progreso. I think it does. I don't know Puerto Morales either. I know that there are big Facebook groups in Mexico City that really help expats out, Black expats. And I think in most of the cities in Mexico, you will find a Black expat community. You just have to typically search Facebook, and they are there. There are Black people, especially Black Americans, all over Mexico seeking asylum or whatever we're going to call it tonight.
I think that's all the questions right now. But I think that just goes back in terms of like getting prepared and such from a money situation. Of course, we know we need some type of money, but in terms of when you're thinking about, depending on where you live, if you live in a high cost of living area, I live in DC, so I mean, there's not many places that you can live. You can probably live in a shoebox for about $600 a month. But if you're trying to think, what should one be budgeting for a sabbatical or just a leave where they don't know when they're coming back? What would be something in terms of a number that would be realistic?
You can do it. I don't know anyone who can't do it on $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You can do it on less. You can do it on more. You can do it on $2,000 to $3,000 a month, including your travel, including your living expenses. But you have to dictate, like life, you have to dictate where your money goes. I went to Switzerland on my career break, and I stayed a solid like 3 days before I was like, I do not have Switzerland money. I don't want to spend Switzerland money is actually more accurate. Like, I must go to the next country because this is running my pockets in a way that I don't want to. But in Mexico City, I live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment in a luxury building for $1,200 a month, and I'm paying too much. I know I'm being overcharged, but I wanted to move quickly, so I just dealt with it. I could probably get this same thing in different parts of the city for like $900, I would guess, depending on where I was. I was paying like twice as much to live in Oakland, so in a smaller apartment. So there's that aspect of, if I'm paying $1,250 for this, our rest of, and this is housing is more expensive compared to like food in Mexico City compared to US numbers. So could I live on $2,000 here? I think I could. I could probably live on like $2,500, even with paying too much to live in a luxury apartment. Traveling the world, I don't think there was ever a month where I spent over $3,000 a month. Could I have done it on half that amount? Probably. I didn't do a lot of planning in advance. I went where I wanted to when I wanted to. I moved from place to place a lot, and so it got expensive. But yeah, I probably could have done that.
So what would be some of maybe like your top 5 least expensive versus your top 5 most expensive? I know we were talking before we started, and there was a place that I loved. I visited, and I know for a fact that wouldn't be on the least expensive list. But what are some of the places as people are plotting out or at least looking at options that you would think of?
So the places I'm going to stick to the places I visited and liked, because I'm not going to say to a place I didn't like. I loved Playa del Carmen. If you like the heat, if you like the beach, it's good. It's cheap. Mexico City, great. Thailand, whether you're in Bangkok or Chiang Mai, was great. As far as cost of living, most of Southeast Asia, I just spent Chiang Mai I really love, and they have a great Black expat community. So I always tell people that is a very good option for them. Most of South America, Buenos Aires was so cheap. I did not see a lot of Black people, so if that's important to you, it might not be right for you for the long term. But for the steaks and wine, you can spend a couple weeks there. Like, it was good and it was cheap. It was a great visit. Expensive places, most of Europe, you know. There are really cheap places in France. There are really expensive places in France. I went to Paris, which was expensive. I went to Switzerland. Where else did I go in Europe? I went to Israel. I went to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. That was not cheap. I also wouldn't live there. Just me. Let's see what else. And then, of course, some places in Asia are going to be expensive, like more expensive than Southeast Asia, like Japan, more expensive in Singapore. But, Malaysia was cheap as well. I think those are my places. Yeah.
Now, in terms of as people are kind of plotting it out, what are some of the things that they should be most conscious of? Of course, housing, but is it going to be less expensive for someone to pick a place and stay there for a month or 6 months versus, not necessarily like the backpacking across across the southeast or whatever. But what are some of the ways in order to start to plot it out and then plan to keep expenses down?
So I always tell people to go to a cost of living calculator like numbeo.com, and that's numbeo.com, to figure out what the cost of living is, or like get a rough estimate of a cost of living. You can also go to theearthawaits.com. They give you the same numbers as Numbeo, but they also give you more information about the city. I don't really know. The information, as far as I can tell, is crowdsourced, but I can't identify who that crowd is. So when they talk about what the safety levels are there, or whether there's discrimination in the city, you got to take that with your own grain of salt. But as far as planning numbers, I love, like I said, going to a cost of living calculator, figuring out what the cost is compared to their home city. I tell most people, and this has been true for most of my clients, that when you're traveling abroad, you can usually travel, if you're paying mortgage or rent, you can usually travel for what you're paying in that for a whole month. So if you are the kind of person who needs like the absolute luxury, that shows itself up in the rent that you pay every month, that is going to show itself up in the living quarters you need when you travel. Same thing, if you can do this, if you're like shoestring budget for everything I do, you're probably not going to become a luxury traveler as you travel the world. So look at how you live at home. If you want to spend as little money as possible, find a country that has a lower cost of living than you have, than your home city, and plan to stay there for no less than a month. So if you have a year to travel and you want to keep your cost of living down, travel for maybe go to 4 cities for 3 months each. Or if you go to 6 cities for 2 months each, it's going to cost a bit more. If you go to 12 cities for 1 month each, it's going to cost a bit more. So the longer you can stay in one place, the less it will cost, and it'll really do you really well. Everything I say is figure out what you need to be comfortable and safe and what you can skimp on, because as you travel, the more you're in new environments, you're going to have situations where you're like, no, I don't like this. Like, this isn't what I'm looking for. You're going to look online at different housing stock on Airbnb and say like, no, this isn't what I wanted. And so you're going to have to adjust. Like in some cities, as an example, in some cities you'll look at the housing and say, I don't want to stay in any of these. Like I looked at Airbnb and none of this is for me. And so that might be a city where you have, you stay in a hotel. So I had points at Marriott hotels. And so I saved them for cities like that, where I was like, none of these look like they're very comfortable, or none of it, like going to a city and seeing that like it's the middle of summer and none of the housing here has air conditioning. Since I'm not used to this climate, should probably be in a place that has air conditioning. Let me get to a hotel, that kind of thing. But once you figure out how you like to travel and you look for low cost of living cities on a cost of living calculator, you can do really well to plan your trip for a lot cheaper. I would also say though, if you're planning on traveling long term, something is going to go wrong. It might be a little wrong, it might be a big wrong, but you need an emergency fund for your trip as well as in life, because there's going to be a time where it's going to cost you more than you think, or something's going to happen. Some host is going to cancel, or you're going to miss your plane or your train, your bus, and you're going to have to pay for 2 tickets. Something's going to happen. Your bag is going to be overweight. You're going to have to pay more for that. And so I don't recommend that people do this without a buffer. I also recommend a buffer for your return. So don't come back from a long trip and have to go back to work right away because you don't have any money. Like, plan to have a little buffer on the back end, whether that's 1 month or 2, so that you can have time to look for work, so you don't have to look for work while you're on your trip, and that you can relax and like, because your trip can be fun, but it can also like be go, 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 go. So have that time. You know, that post-vacation day where you're like, I need a vacation for my vacation. Like that, if you're traveling long-term, that can definitely happen. And so I recommend that people have some time and like, decompress from that.
Marie says, how is it making friends in Mexico City? And so I know the dating not really happening, but in terms of just friendships and so forth, how is that going?
That's also hard because right now, because everything's locked down. But are, like I said before, there are Black expat groups in the city, and they would have events. They would meet up when I was here a lot in 2019. And so I would go to those things and I would meet friends, and I got to know quite a few people. And so it was a great experience. Making friends is not hard. I met people in my spin class. I met people all over the place. Other expats, Black or otherwise, are typically really happy to meet someone who speaks English fluently and who seems like a familiar face. Not in that sense that like, oh, you're American. That's a door opener for a lot of people.
And then Marie also asks, how did you fund your medical expenses? Did you include that in the budget, and are you still using credit cards?
I am still using credit cards every month, and I pay them off every month unless I don't. But I would say at least 10 months out of a year, I have zero balance at the end of the month. But I charge everything on everything. If I'm getting points, like everything I can possibly charge. I try to charge my rent on my credit card, and my landlord was like, sis, like, what do you know? But I tried. No, I use credit cards. They have, once I got debt free, I did not take on any other consumer debt except for new cards, like 2 new cards, because I wanted whatever the benefits were of that card. But I haven't, since I paid off my mortgage, I mean, funny story, and then I'll go back to the medical question. The reason I was able to travel without, one of the reasons I was able to travel without worry was that I I had my house paid off in full. Now my house, told you, was cheap. It was like, when I purchased it, it was $84,000, super cheap. Paid off in full. Because I hated seeing how much I was paying, even though it wasn't a lot. I hated seeing how much I was paying in interest every month. Like, let me not pay you that money and keep it to myself. So I paid it off. And when I sold it, it didn't have a loan on it. And I had it in my accounts waiting to buy a house in the Bay Area. At the same week, I had bought a house with my mom in December, super cheap house, like $17,000, I think. And we flipped it, we did repairs, we rehabbed it, we sold it. I had my half of that house money. So I had house and a half money in Columbus, and I got to the Bay Area and it wasn't even enough for a down payment on a house, on a condo, on a significantly smaller condo in Oakland. And so I sat around with that money in my account, thinking like, eventually I will buy something. Eventually I'll have enough money saved up on top of this that I will buy something. But I found out I was getting laid off before that happened. And that's another thing that happened in my benefit, in the sense that if I had bought a house, I wasn't going to sell the house to go travel the world. And I wasn't going to, like, I'm sure I wouldn't have rented it out. I'm sure I would have been like, I have a mortgage to pay. I need to make sure I pay this mortgage. And so I would have gotten another job and I wouldn't have had the experience that I had. And so all of these different things lined up, including being priced out of a housing market in the city I wanted to be in, led me to taking my break. Also, in America, we act like home ownership is the end all be all. But once you own a home and you gotta do all, like, an actual freestanding house, and you gotta make sure the lawn is cut. Girl, I tried for a couple years, I tried cutting the grass in Columbus in the summertime when it was like 90 degrees. And I was like, this isn't for me. Like, what am I doing? So once I sold my house, I was like, condos from now on. Like, I'm not, this house life is not, it's too much. The roof needs to be redone. Oh, I got to cut. No, it's not. And like I said, for me, the house would have held me back from what I wanted because of the loan associated with it, if I had done that in the Bay Area. And so I see home ownership as a double-edged sword. Like, yes, it is a great way. They can be great investments. You know, you can get a house that is a great investment, but a lot of us stretch ourselves with more house than we need, or more house than we is best for our financial future. And that can be added stress, that added Black middle class stress that we talked about earlier. When, you know, I mean, you don't get a medal, you don't get a prize for buying it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a great thing to do if it's the right thing for you, but it's not that great of a thing to do if it doesn't fit your financial plan long term. So I don't think homeownership is for everybody. But that is not the question you asked. That was part of it. Let me get back about medical expenses. I never had medical expenses except for the few times I came back to the US a couple times, and like 3 times in a row 2 times in a row I came back to the US, I ended up in the ER. And the second time it was 2 trips to the ER and 1 time home. And then I ended up going back to the US for a year because I came back and, like, within a week of being there, I needed surgery. A mess. Somehow my body passes those customs officers, and something happens and it breaks down, and, like, it's a mess. But around the world, the only healthcare I got was completely optional. It was like, I got my teeth cleaned and I got an eye visit, like, went to the eye doctor and got a visit and got glasses. but I never had any medical expenses. I kept my US medical insurance because knew I was coming back a few times. And it was actually the best thing I could have done because, like I said, I ended up in the ER and it was a mess. Let's see. Now doing it, Adelia, I'm putting her on the spot right now. I talked to her the other day, and she got Mexican medical insurance, and she's going to show people how to do that because we talked about that. I don't know anything about Mexican medical insurance. I still have a plan in the US because I go back, like I said, I go back and I need to make sure I'm okay when I go back. But around the world, healthcare is generally so cheap that I had travel insurance in case anything bad happened. I had a plan that would fly me home if anything bad happened, if I got sick and I needed it. And I had a plan that would fly my body home if the worst happened, because that is that can be super, super expensive, a lot more than most people think. And so I had those plans in case I got sick abroad, but I never got sick abroad. I only got sick in the US. So yeah, I've never had to worry about medical insurance overseas. I rely on my travel insurance and my US medical insurance. And, but there are international insurance plans you can get that will cover you all over the world. I just didn't get one.
Now, when you think about like you're getting rid of so much stuff, you're getting ready to like downsize, what did you do with your stuff? Even, you have a house, even if you sell the house, there's stuff.
So, and I'm a stuff person. I have stuff. So when I moved from Columbus to Ohio, because I moved in 2016 and then I took my career break in 2018. So they're all kind of related. I moved from Columbus, I put my stuff in a truck, dropped off everything in a storage unit until I found my home. And then I lived with my mom for about 6 months. So I had took a couple suitcases off of that truckload and had them at my mom's house. Then moved into an apartment for a year. I left when my lease was up. 15 months in the apartment. And I moved in my bed, the TV, other things from my storage unit. I decided to go travel a month before I left. Give yourself more time. Don't do this in a month. Learn from me. Do better. And so I put everything in my apartment went back in storage. I did not downsize at all. I did not do anything because I was going to come back in a year and live in the Bay Area. And then about 4 months into my trip, I was like, let me see these numbers again. I'm not doing that. And so I have been paying for storage in the Bay Area, which is not cheap, since May of 2008. Since May of 2016 for storage. I forgot about that part where I actually lived there and I still have the same storage unit. I've been paying for storage there for almost 5 years, and I have not been back to the Bay Area since I left in May of 2018. So I've been paying for 2.5 years for stuff I'm gonna never look at again. Don't do that.
That's great. That's great advice. In terms of like just being prepared, because that's an added expense where you're living for a lot less than being in the Bay Area, but unfortunately you're sending money to the Bay Area every single month.
Yeah, no, I planned on going back and getting rid of some of my stuff, maybe putting in the stuff I needed I recommend that people downsize to nothing more than like get it in a suitcase or a closet, put it in a friend's garage, put it in like downsize to like the bare minimum. I think I would have kept like one piece of art and maybe something. I don't know what else. I don't need my IKEA couch. I don't. One of the reasons I kept the stuff was I love my bed. My friend hit me up and was like, you have your bed in storage? Can I have it? And I was like, yeah. Like, just if you could take stuff out of my storage unit now so it's easier when I go in there and clear things out, great. I planned on going back in the fall of 2019 to clear up my stuff, and then I got hurt, and then pandemic. I just had I have not been back since. So if you're going to take a break, if you're going to move, one of the things that comes up a lot with my clients is we are really stuck on the life we have, and it's the only thing we know. And so we think that, or we plan on coming back to that life without giving yourself space to consider whether the life you want at the end of a trip is the life you're starting with at the beginning. We don't see that, like, there's a gap there, and we don't have to cross that bridge directly across the gap. You can go somewhere else. Like, you don't have to go back into your old life. And for so many of us, it's comfortable, and that's our plan, unless someone says, you don't have to do that. So this is me saying, you don't have to go back into your old life. You can do something completely new if you want to. Like, if you're bold enough to put all, like, one suitcase of stuff in your friend's garage and travel the world for 6 months, a year, 2 years, you don't have to do that with the plan that you're going to come back to the same city, to the same job, to the same industry. Because if you do that, you're narrowing your options in advance. And for me, like I said, I just knew I was gonna come back. I was gonna be a lawyer because I went to law school for all them damn years, and I paid all of those loans. I just knew I was gonna come back and get a job doing the same thing in the same city. And like I said, 4 months into it, I was like, clocking it, having someone waiting for meetings in the morning, meetings on the weekend. No, I can't. I cannot have a boss. After not having a boss for like 4 months, it was like the idea of having to answer to someone else. It's like, I can't do that. Now, like I said, if the market tumbles, you might see me with a boss again. But hopefully not. Hopefully not. If you see me like that, if I'm working a job, I probably don't want to be there. And I'm probably going to have the I don't want to be there attitude, which is not good either. So if you've reached a place where you have the I don't want to be there attitude, if you are burned out, if you're stressed, if you're thinking about time off, I have a sabbatical planning guide that can help you. It gives you the steps to figure out how to do what it is, take a sabbatical, take a break. I've got a lot of advice on my website. It's sheetahsontheloose.com. She's going to drop the link to the guide in the Facebook group. It's a great way. Taking a sabbatical is a great way to kind of reset your life. I look at it like, if you're burned out, it's a great opportunity to say, like, okay, I'm pressing the stop button now, and I'm going to pause on like the things that are causing me stress. I'm going to take some time and then reevaluate whether I want to go back to or what I want my life to look like. When I was working at Uber in 2017, say, I could not have imagined that a couple years later I'd be living in Mexico City and working for myself and seeing like the high rises and the mountains from my window. It wasn't something that I ever considered, in the sense that so much of our life is like one small decision followed by another small decision, followed by another small decision. And all of those things add up to lead us where we are right now. But it's very rare that we get an opportunity to say, if I could start over, what would I be doing and where would I be doing it? And a career break is like that. For most people, that start over point. Like, if I can take a break, even if it's just a month, what do I want to do on the other side of that break? A month is often not enough time to decompress. But if you can take 6 months, what do you want your life to look like? And you get an opportunity in that time, whether you're traveling, whether you're sitting still, whether you're in the mountains writing your memoirs, you get that time to really reevaluate what you want out of life and reprioritize.
Now, you talked about getting rid of all your stuff. One question I have is, what are some things you need to make sure that you bring? I mean, is it like hair products or just certain things that you may not be able to find when you get someplace? I know you talked about maybe not being able to find like a bed and you were sleeping on an air mattress and so forth. What are some things that, as you're packing those 2 suitcases or whatever, that you want to make sure that you bring? I know some people are like, I got to have a certain food or what have you. What are some of those short list items?
So I never have a conversation with Black women that doesn't involve hair products because you know us, it comes up. But one of the things, I've seen a therapist. I was burned out. I've seen a therapist before I was leaving. I left, and I was processing something with her, and I was saying that like I want to pack light. I would love to travel the world just a small carry-on roller bag. It's not me. I tried, it's not me. But that was like my goal. Like maybe I can do this. I can, travel with that. And I was like, but I'm worried about not having like the personal care items that are really like I really like and blah blah blah. And as I was talking through it, I was like, but if I'm really focused on bringing the things that I know, I'll never have an opportunity to find potentially better things. And so I bring, because I live in Mexico and I know what I can get and what I can't get, when I come down, bring like one bottle of things I can't get, but I don't bring, like, I love a specific leave-in conditioner. And so I bring that because my hair hates protein. And so finding a non-protein conditioner is super hard. But for like a regular conditioner, I will be in the aisles. There's a Walmart that has one full aisle of shampoo and conditioner and a second half aisle. And so like both sides of the aisle, like they have something you can use if you stand there and you read the ingredients and you know what you like. And so for me, not carrying everything I thought I wanted allowed me in other countries around the world to find things that I liked and worked well for me that I wouldn't have tried otherwise. So it's the same thing of like food. Like if you only eat Popeye sandwiches, you're not going to have to, you're not going to explore the other areas. And like you're not going to know the other foods and find out maybe you love ramen and you would have never known you love ramen. Same thing with hair care. Like if you only do one thing and you're wedded to this one thing around the world, you don't get the opportunity to see the other amazing things out there. The things that I try to bring something that reminds me of home, something that's comfortable, something small usually. Typically for me, I like when I got tired of traveling, which sounds crazy to say, but after like 9 months, I was like, this is too much. I needed a plant. I needed to be in a place long enough where I could have a plant because I was going from like week to week. So it wasn't something that I needed to bring from home, but it was something that something I just needed in my environment to show some stability. I needed stability, and nothing I could bring from home would give me that stability, but the plant was like an object of stability. I talked to someone the other day on my YouTube channel who she moved, and so it's different. She moved for a number of months, so it's different than traveling. And so I gave her a break. She traveled with 4 or 5 suitcases. One suitcase was just hair and body care, and she carried 5 mugs with her. I love her. She knows, and she sees this, hey girl, hey. And she acknowledged all of this publicly. But you don't need a suitcase. And if you're traveling long-term, if you're going to more than one place, do not bring 4 or 5 suitcases. I tell people, no more than 2 things on wheels. So if you want a big suitcase and a little suitcase, maybe a backpack or a tote bag, you do not need more things than you can use in a month. So if you're traveling for a month, think of it like that when you're packing. Think that you're traveling for a month and bring the things you need for a month. If you're packing a big suitcase, bring the hair care items you love, but you don't need 2 of them. Just bring one. And when you're done with it, you'll find something that works. Your hair will not fall off. You will be in places where a lot of products will be lightening lotions. A lot of like lotions will have some kind of lightening aspect to them, but not all of them. You'll be able to find lotions that do not lighten the skin. And so those fears that we have around the world, it's rare that you can't find like the grocery store closest to me is just chock full of Palmer's cocoa butter products. Like, I don't know why, but they have like the shelf space is like this wide and like a couple of shelves. And I'm like, okay, like these things, you know what I mean? Products that you're familiar with, you'll be able to find all around the world because so many of them are made by huge companies like P&G that distribute everywhere. That you can just you'll find things that you're comfortable with.
Now, what do you think are some of the bigger mistakes, like the costly mistakes that people make when they're making this transition or taking this time off?
Where do I see people making mistakes? I don't really like the word mistakes, you know, because we all end up where we end up as we're supposed to. But I think planning too much, over planning is for me on my mistake list. Because if you know, if you're traveling for 6 months, if you're traveling for 3 months, and you know every flight, train, bus, everything you're taking, you're either going to be upset when you're leaving a place because it's too soon or too late, or you're going to change your plans and go somewhere else. As we explore the world and a lot of opportunities open for us, you're going to meet people who you want to travel with. You're going to go places and say, nah, the city ain't for me, or I need to be here longer because I found my boo at the beach. I don't know why, but you know what I mean? There's going to be some reason you want to stay in a city longer. And if you have everything planned out, like for your entire trip or for even more than 2 months in advance, you're going to feel regret at some point. And that regret, you can deal with that by rebooking and maybe losing some money, or just, you know, doing the thing, not spending the money and missing out on the thing you wanted. That's the biggest thing I see people doing. And not just that you spend the money, but I think a lot of stress goes into planning out everything you're going to do in the future. Like, a lot of us are very type A. We're thinking about the future and early retirement. You're a planner. But if you plan, like I said, everything you're doing on your trip, every place you're staying, that's a lot of thought that went into it in advance that you didn't have to put into it, that you could have kind of just rolled with the flow more.
I think that's great advice.
Thank you.
Definitely not easy, but great advice.
It's not easy. One of the things I want to talk about that came up for me when, and I don't know how relevant it's going to be for your group, because a lot of you might have specific numbers, but a lot of the people I talk to, or a lot of the hesitation that comes up when people talk about career breaks and early retirement is that, well, I won't have enough money. This comes up a lot with people. Like, I'd love to take a career break. I don't want to work. I'm burned out, or I want to retire early, but I won't have enough money for the future. And one of the questions I always ask is, what is enough? And a lot of times people can't answer it. Now, your group might have a specific number. Everyone might have a specific number in mind, but I'm sure there are people out there in this group that still don't have a number. And whether that's your FIRE number or just a number that you're like, you know what, I'll be good. Because that's where I was. I was like, I didn't even know FIRE was a math formula when I left. I saw a number on my screen and I was like, sure, I can live off this for enough years and I'll be okay. But you have to find a number, whether that's retirement, whether that's a career break, whether that is any kind of reset when you're saving for something. You have to know when to stop. And not like stop like I'm not saving anymore, but stop as in, I can do the things I want to do in my life because I have this nest egg, because I have this money saved. Because if you say, I'm saving for retirement, what does that mean? When will it be enough? We live in a country where it's never enough. You can never have enough money. You know what I mean? Like, there's no end in sight for the majority of our population. There's no promotion at the job that will be enough when there's another one, you know what I mean, that's available. But that's how our society works, and that's what we've dealt with our whole lives, this never ending fight for success and for money. And you have to be, until you tell yourself this is the point where I can do X, or this is the point where I can do Y, it's not going to happen. And that literally is one of the things I see stopping most people. I talk to them. It's like, I won't have enough money. I won't be able to pay for my kids' college. I'm like, well, how much money do you need? I don't know. Well, like, can you ballpark it? No. And I'm like, well, then how do you know you won't have enough if you have no idea how much money it is? And if you don't, like, if you haven't done the math of what it would take to take a break, how do you know, like, you're just, it, some of that is, like I said, what's ingrained in us in society, and some of that is just natural human fear that happens when you're like, oh no, this is something new, this is something scary, I can't do this. And so we tell ourselves all these things like, we can't afford it, or we shouldn't do it. Or for me, it was, like I said, I thought about going about a month before I wanted to leave, before I decided I left. And I was talking to my therapist. We had like 4 sessions in that month. And every other week I was like, yes, I'm going. No, I'm not going. Yes, I'm going. No, I'm not going. And I told her once, I was like, even after I realized I had enough money to not work for years, I went to her and I was like, but what if I got another job and I saved and I planned for a year and then I went? And she was like, you're not gonna go. Like, if you don't go now, right? Like, I was laid off. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a mortgage. I wasn't in a relationship. I had a dog that my friend agreed to watch for me very, very kindly. But if I didn't go when all of those things lined up and I had the cash there waiting for me, what made me think I was going to like go when I had to quit a job? You know what I mean? Like, if I had a job that I'd gotten, would I quit a job to go? If I wasn't going to go when I don't have a job? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I see come up with a lot of people is we either put other people first, like, I cannot go because this family member doesn't want me to go, or this relationship, or we like we talk ourselves out of it because of either I won't have enough, or I can do it in the future, or something like that gets in the way of us living like our best life. So that, not even like the money stuff, once you sit down and work it out, most people are like, oh, here's a path to making it happen. It's the fear that comes up with people. Like, I teach a course helping women do this. And we have group training sessions. And every week we're talking someone through their fears. Every single week we're like, okay, so this is what came up for you. Let's talk about that. You know, a couple weeks ago we had someone who was like, I could go this year, or I'm starting a new job, and if I work for 5 more years, and we were like, sis, what? Like, 5 more years? That's not, you're not gonna do it. If you can do it now and you won't, there may be very valid reasons, but we need to listen to ourselves and figure out whether those reasons are fear-based or whether it's like logistical. Because a lot more times it's fear-based than anything.
I think that because Darshell has a great question that kind of piggybacks off that. She says, do you have to pay off everything before you take a career break? And I know so many people are like, I still have student loans, I have car notes, or whatever it might be. Is that the first step, or can you do it without?
I don't want people taking career breaks and being stressed. Like, this is time for you to de-stress. This is time for you to reset. And so if you have a car loan, if you have credit card debt, if you have a mortgage that is going to cause you stress while you travel, I recommend paying it off before you go. Student loans, let them die on the vine, whatever. I don't even, like, do you? I had a financial planner a long time ago tell me that no one ever pays off their student loans, and so I shouldn't even think about it. Instead, I should just invest my money with her. It was a terrible, terrible advice. But I also did not stress about, I had huge student loans for a while. They weren't getting any smaller. And so that's why I tried to pay them off early. But I tell people that if it's between your mental health and deferring a student loan, defer that student loan. You'll take a break. Now, if it's between your mental health as in you're in a job that is making you unhappy, and between your mental health as in you're traveling but you have credit card debt and you have no idea how you're going to pay it off and it stresses you out all the time, I would say work for a while and try to pay that off, or at least get it down to an amount where you don't feel that stress when the bills come. Different strokes for different folks. We all handle money differently. Debt makes me really uncomfortable, which is why my message is always like, pay off as much of it as you can before you go. But you like student loans. I mean, Biden's gonna forgive them all, right?
Now, Marie brings up a question that I think so many people are worried about, especially when we start thinking about taking a sabbatical. So maybe they're not at their fire number. So she says she's worried about re-entry into the workforce. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? How do you go about that? How are you prepared about that? I know you talked about having a cushion for when you get back, but I think that is a fear that many people have, of been wandering the world, and now I show up like, okay, give me a job again.
Okay, so there are a couple different things I'm gonna get to on this one. But one of them, I interviewed someone earlier this year who said, when I asked her if she was worried about getting a job on her return, she said, I hated my job. I knew I could always come back and get another job I hated. And I was like, huh, yes.
Now that.
the wisdom in that moment of being like, I don't even like what I'm doing. Like, I need another, yeah. And I think for most people, that part is true. Like, if you're unhappy in your job, can you come get back and get another job you're unhappy in? Yeah. And so a lot of us, not everyone, but a lot of us hold on to the job we hate for security, which, like the food and like the hair care, if you're holding on to a thing that you know, it doesn't give you the opportunities to see what else is out there. Same thing goes for a job. If you're not happy in your job, why are you holding it so tight in your fist? Why are you afraid to let go? But the other side is, depending on how long you're gone, unless you're in a field that requires you to have like up to the moment skill, like I need to have been at a conference every month to keep my skills tight, which isn't what most people's lives are like. Unless you're in one of those careers, when you come back, you'll be relaxed, you'll be happy, you will be a great job seeker because you're going to be like in the best frame of mind, have a cushion. And if you come back and you start interviewing at places and they're like, they look down on you taking a career break, or they look down on you taking time off, those are also the same people who are going to start hating when you try to take a vacation. So keep that in mind, that the people who are like, I can't believe, like who don't view your career break as something you did for yourself, if they see it as like you either taking away from your career or taking away from the company you worked for, especially if they see just taking away from the company you worked for if you left your job, they're gonna be mad when you ask for 2 weeks off. They're gonna be mad when you ask for a week off. Like those are not the bosses you want to work for. Like that is my position. Like if you cannot support me being the best me I can be, what's it going to be like to work when I wasn't even working for you? What is it going to be like working for you if I do get here? Most, being unemployed because you chose it and because it was the best choice for you, I think can often put you in a better position than like showing up to the interview desperate for the job because you hate your job. Like when I was interviewing for jobs before I left, because I did some interviews, but I would show up like, I don't even want, like talking to people like, why am I smiling in your face? I don't even want, like talking to you, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to work for you. I don't want to work with you. But I feel like I have to get this job. And so I feel like I have to smile on your face. And if I was in a different place mentally, like the place I was in after my break, I probably wouldn't have even applied to those places because I would have known what the work environments were. But when you're in an unhappy situation, you can often be desperate for that change, and that desperation can come out while you're interviewing, and it can make you make choices that aren't as good. Now, if you come back with a cushion, you may not be, and you started like the process maybe a month or two before, maybe 3 months before, looking for places that would be good for you. Before you come back, you probably won't feel as desperate as when you're like, if I have to go back to that job tomorrow, I'm gonna cry in my car, which I have done. Woo! This gives you more freedom.
Now, Tiffany says, do you use your retirement funds or are you using personal savings as your living expenses?
So I work for myself. So I consider myself early, like I say that I'm retired, like I retired early, but then I end up like most of us, I'm so stuck in like the work world. And once I got back to my laptop, it was like I work so much for myself that I don't know if I'm retired anymore. I'm retired with the company that I have some income from that. I do not touch my retirement savings. I have never touched my retirement savings. I had house money. My investments have grown significantly over the past few years, where since I lost my job, since I got laid off, I have more money in my investments now than I did when I stopped working in 2018. So I get more investment income than I spend in a year. Move abroad, keep your cost of living low.
Always good stuff. Well, perfect. I don't see any more questions just yet.
Okay, let's see. I had some notes for y'all. Oh, I should plug this now. Hey y'all. I run a group called Exodus Summit. We did a summit last year to help women, Black women, move abroad. We are doing workshops in January and February to help people get residency. It's open to everyone. Help them get residency in Mexico, France, and Portugal. And if they want to start teaching online or teaching abroad, we're doing workshops for them as well. So we're going to walk you through everything you need to do in the process, the application, all of that, to get your residency in Mexico, Portugal, or France. And those can be found at exodussummit.com/workshops. So if you're interested in life abroad, those will be, the first one is Mexico, which is this week. So we'd love to have some of you there.
Now, tell us the benefit of getting residency versus just visiting.
Depends on the country. So in France, you can't be there more than 90 days in a 180-day period. So you can only be there 3 months out of every 6 months if you don't have residency. In Mexico, if I'm going to apply for a residency soon, if I had it now, I could stay here for however long I wanted. And if things got shut down for COVID, they would let me in if the border got shut down, which is something that, because I ended up getting stuck abroad, and this is, I guess, a warning for everyone. When I traveled, when I did my career break, the last 3 months when I was in Southeast Asia, I rented an apartment and then I went overseas. I rented an apartment in Chiang Mai and then I went to Vietnam. And I didn't have a problem coming back into Thailand, but I heard of people who did. And so if I couldn't get back in, all of my stuff would have been in my place in Thailand. When I was in Mexico, on my tourist visa, I went back home and I got hurt in Florida and I couldn't come back. And so all of my stuff was in my apartment. And so now I'm not worried about getting hurt again because that can't happen again. It can't. But say something happens and Mexico was like, no more Americans, y'all gotta stop because you're not getting this under control. They probably won't because Mexico doesn't have it under control either. But in case that happened, if I had my residency, that wouldn't be a problem. I can get a car plated in my name if I was here. I could buy property down here if I was a resident. I don't want to do those things, but I do want the ability to be here, stay here. And then some places, especially in the beach cities, will give you a little discount if you're a resident versus a tourist. If I ever needed to show ID down here, I'd rather show resident ID than a tourist ID. I like the idea of being here. It's never been a problem with landlords being here on a tourist visa because you can be here for 6 months on a visa. But if I wanted to be here for years, like if I wanted to move down here permanently, I wouldn't want to have to do those border crossings to renew my visa every time in case eventually someone was like, we know what you're doing. You're just trying to get around our process and you can't do that anymore. And then, yeah, I think that not knowing how things are going to play out with the pandemic in the future, I personally like the idea of being fully legit down here, not just a visitor. Yeah.
All right. And I dropped in the link for the workshop. So definitely check those out. You said Mexico is Wednesday.
Yes,
so
Wednesday.
Getting your residency in Mexico, you have the link. And so check that out on Wednesday.
Okay, so I earlier today looked up some numbers so you could know. I'm talking about Mexico City because it's what I love. But I went to Numbeo and I looked at consumer prices, including rent. So if you consider all of your expenses, including rent, it costs 131% more to live in Fort Lauderdale, which is where I was in Florida, than it does in Mexico City. And it costs 191% more to live in Oakland. So my cost of living is 1/3 of what it would be in Oakland and about like 75% of what it would be in Fort Lauderdale. And that to me is just like, can't beat it.
It changes your fire number.
But yes, I'm not doing the math, but yeah, it changes your fire number and it allows you to have a freedom. There's a freedom that comes from not just being financially independent, but being in a place where your prosperity is not seen as like stealing from someone else, or like your prosperity is not negative. There is not that like stress of, are my neighbors secretly racist? Now, my neighbors might be secretly racist. I don't know. They were very nice. It's a Mexican couple across the hall. They're friendly enough. They wave, we go about our way. But like there have been no microaggressions unless they've been in Spanish. And then I don't know. So, you know what I mean? Like the people who work in the building are really nice. Everyone is really, really friendly and nice. I love the city. There's nowhere I've been in Mexico where people have not been warm and welcoming. We're not speaking a lot. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not a lot. There's no place I've been where people haven't gone out of their way to help me. There's no place I've been where I've had a negative interaction with police. People always worry about that coming down here. The police here are like, if you don't talk to me, I won't talk to you. Like, literally, but if you have a question, I will help you. I will go out of my way. I will direct you to where you have to go. I will help you. Someone I know had a police officer use their bus pass to get my friend on the bus because she didn't have a pass, like the other day in Mexico City. Like, where else is that happening? But if you mind your business and you don't have anything to say to them, they have nothing to say to you. They are doing whatever. I don't like calling them lazy because I don't think they're lazy, but they are really not concerned with you. Like, it's this weird thing. And I find it around the world too, where like I'm used to feeling this tension when I come in contact with police officers. And when I'm here in Mexico, especially Mexico City, it's very much like they see you and they literally do not care. They do not like they will help you if you need help. Otherwise, there is no interaction to be had. They will say hello if you say hello. Otherwise, they are so good at minding their own business. It blows my mind at how good the police are down here at minding the business that pays them, which is not your business unless you are breaking a law. It is not your business. They are really like, there's a lot of them. There's one on every corner, but they're really like, if you're not. And so just that difference in environment where I don't randomly feel tension walking down the street, where like I don't have to worry about facing overt racism, where like my prosperity isn't going to be challenged, where my ability to buy something or own something of my own. Yes, that cell phone is mine. You know what I mean? Like those things aren't happening. They're not happening here to me. And that could be because I'm a foreigner. I don't know what would happen to indigenous people, to Afro-Mexicans. I don't know how they're treated. I don't think they're treated as well as I'm treated because I have an expat privilege. But I have to decide where you know what I mean? Like I have to decide where I live. I don't see people being treated poorly regularly. It's just not something that I visibly see. And if I see it, I don't understand it because there are cultural things that we'll never really pick up if you're not from a place. And so it's just a much lighter life. It's life where I don't worry about racism, where I don't worry about classism, where people, I always say that people in Mexico are it's a lot like being in a Black community. If you're not from there, people might be like, oh, she's not from here. But they're not going to ask you what you're doing here. Do you have a right to be here? They're not like, look, it's just like, I see you. And then I'm going back to what I do because this is my business and that is your business. And someone might watch you as you walk down the street, but they're not in your face staring at you. They're not making you uncomfortable. It's not like a lot of countries where someone might touch you or your hair, that kind of place. They might be interested in what you're doing, especially if you're in a very local neighborhood, but they're going to leave you alone. They're not like, interacting with you in a negative fashion. All of the interaction I have with strangers that are initiated by them are very positive. Like if my hair is in a fro, it's like, oh, I might get like, love your hair. Or I might get someone like staring and waving, but no one's, treating me like a circus animal and touching me. Like that doesn't happen here. So it's a nice mix of like people who are familiar with Black people and can still manage to treat you with respect. Like it's like, wow, this is so foreign. So it's been that part of it's been really great for me.
Now, Deidre does say, without giving specific details, what investments are you gaining income from while abroad? Are you using like index funds or business investments? What's that there?
So I am very set it and forget it. I have had Vanguard funds since about 2009, 2010, probably when I got that job that got me out of the little unemployment dip. And I've opened up some new ones when I got some more money, but I don't like, I'm not the one to think about like stocks daily or to, like I sold my house when I moved because I didn't want to be a long distance landlord. So for me, it was very much like, where can I put my money that might not get me the best return, but is going to get me something I can live on and not have to think about, because we have to choose what we do with our brain space. And I don't choose to think about investments. And so I put them in Vanguard funds that have good returns, and I just leave them there, and they have done really well for me. And yeah, that's it.
I like that. It gives a different perspective. I know a lot of people are like, got to be a day trader and all these other things. You can definitely figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
Make it work.
So for me, and just because I think your audience might appreciate this perspective, for me, what works for me is saying, I'm a Taurus, I'm very stubborn, I'm very like slow and plodding. I am going to put my money here and it's going to stay there and it's going to do what it does. And I'm not going to think like it's very focused. It's very like, I don't care if that fund is doing poorly. I am not about to get in there and fiddle faddle with it. Even within like different index funds, unless I have new money to deposit, it stays where it is. It stays where it is. Let the market do its thing. It's done its thing for 10 years. Like I said, it has treated me very well over that time. And I choose to use my brain space for other things and to not be stressed. Like that, I think for a lot of us, what the right thing to do for retirement can create an amount of stress. When I had my old 401k at Fidelity at my old company, the fees were ridiculous. But I never rolled it over because the stress of doing the right thing with the money was like so much. I left it there for 2 years. And then when I rolled it over in like the space of 6 months, I made more money than I had on it, more investment income than I had in 2 years because I didn't have those fees anymore. The fees were significantly lower once I managed it on my own. And it was like, oh, I could have been doing a lot more if I had faced that fear and just made the decision and stuck with it. And so that's what I do. I'm like, I put my money there, leave it there. I have some, perfectly transparent, I have some Uber stock. And so for a while last year, I was like, it's just not gonna be worth nothing, huh? It's just not gonna be worth nothing. But it bounced back. And so that is some of the increased money that I have after leaving, that came in after I left. So yeah, it's all in the stock market. Please God.
Ride the wave.
Right? Like, and you know, like I said, if I saw a business opportunity that was really good, I might take some money out and do something with it. If I saw some property I wanted to buy, something I wanted to invest in, but I'm not looking for that. I'm satisfied with you know what those accounts are doing, and I'm just like, let me work on my business, let me enjoy my life, let me not think about money, because not thinking about money is truly like, that is truly the having privilege, and I recognize that. But not thinking about what my retirement accounts are doing daily. And I say this as someone who's to check their bank account daily because I had no idea, because girl, like back in 2000, like even 2010, I from 2009, 2010 to probably to 2012, I wasn't there every day like, let me see, because I just don't know. So to now be like, I set it and forget it and it is what it is just a different experience for me. And I recognize for me that came with saying, this is how I'm going to manage it and I'm not going to stress about it. It just, whatever happens, happens. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Any other kind of closing comments or things to think about, especially, I mean, you talked about kind of looking at the change in the cost of living, downsizing your stuff. Don't bring the world with you. I know we're all scared that, you ain't gonna find your hot sauce or your grits or whatever it is that you need. But really just kind of throwing your all into it, I think is a great message of, you're taking this time to reevaluate where you are, where things stand in your life. I like you talk about the sabbatical or that gap year, which, wealthy teens get a chance to take a gap year after high school before they become an adult. And most of us work straight until, from our teens up until now. And so just kind of thinking about that and not overthinking it, which isn't easy to do. Any other kind of closing thoughts or things to think of? Of course, join you on the workshops on Wednesday. Any other kind of big things that we should be plotting out or thinking about?
One thing you just said that really touched me was that I'm a yoga teacher, and I knew someone from the yoga world who would work like this white woman who would work 6 months in a coffee shop and then travel the world for 6 months. She was in England, and I was always like, but how? Now, first of all, but how was none of my business, right? Like, worry about your own money. Don't worry about anybody else's. So that but how was like, but it wasn't until I actually tried to do it that I was like, oh, I can do it too. And I want that to be the message to you as well, is that you you can see someone doing it and say, I can never do it, but you don't know until you start doing the math. If you need help with the math, you can hit me up. I have a budget worksheet. Like I said, I coach women through this all the time. I have a course on it. I can help you take a sabbatical. I haven't had anyone come to me who was like, no, I can't do this. I've had people come to me who were, when we worked through it all, I've had people come to me who were like, I don't want to take the risk, which is different than I cannot do this. There are a lot of ways to take a break in a way that is financially responsible and that won't mess up your fire number. I will say that as Black women, we tend to carry so much of our families and our communities on our back that we hardly ever do anything for ourselves. And so if you're working really, really hard to retire early, if you're working really, really hard because you feel like your community expects that from you or your family expects that from you, you have to look at the quality of life you're living. Like, are you happy with the life you're living? Are you happy with the job you have? And if not, like, what can you do about that? That may be a sabbatical, it may be a break, it may be something entirely different, but it's really worth evaluating today how you feel about your life. And if you are not happy with it, like, can you make a big change? Not a little change, because like for me, when I wasn't happy, it was like I would go to the gourmet ice cream place down the street and pick up a pint. But like that doesn't change. Like, it makes me happy in the moment, but it doesn't change my life. And so what can I do that will add long-term happiness? And it may not be working more for more financial security. It may be taking a risk on your financial security right now for your mental health. It may be, it takes a year longer to hit your early retirement, but you're more happy in your working years than you are now because you've made a change, whether that's a different job, whether that's some time off. Like you said earlier, so many of us are working straight through it because that's all we're known. That's all we know. It's what we expect of ourselves. It's what we expect of other people. It's what other people expect of us. But there's other ways to do it. I stopped working for other people when I was 38 and I did not have a business. But I knew I could survive. And so I think around that time I had, because we talked about this earlier, I think I had in my retirement account about $500,000. And that's when I was like, do I have to? Like, it's not fire. Because for me, I needed more money to feel comfortable with fire at that point. But it was also like, I don't have to have a shitty boss. Like, that was that was my fuck you money. That was an I don't have to have a shitty boss number. I don't have to have a job I hate number. And honestly, it could have been a lot less, especially at a different age. It could have been a lot less, depending on the situation, depending on how unhappy I was. I just looked at it and like I said, I made that decision in a month. I saw the number and I was like, I'm not getting a job I don't want to get. Like, I'm not stressing about working because I have this money saved. And like I said, it's grown a lot since then. It has given me that safety and security that, like I said, unless something bad happens, I don't have to work. But even then, like even when I was on my, I'm gonna wrap this up because I know you asked me to. I told you I just talk though, I just talk. When I was on my career break, I was still like, I can't spend so much money. I need to save, because that idea that like we need to have this nest egg, even if we don't know what we're going to do with it. So I was like, spend as little as possible, spend as little as possible, spend as little as possible. And I did. And in some ways, I didn't enjoy my trip as much as I could have because I was so worried about spending as little as possible, because I hadn't reached a point where my happiness was more important than my money. And I think right now I've reached that place where it's like, yes, I could have paid a lot less for my apartment, but if I'm going to be stuck inside during a pandemic, I want a place that's going to make me really happy. And so I'm willing to pay for that in ways that I probably wouldn't have in the past. And like I said, that some of that comes from financial security. It's changed my life. The career break changed my life. And then telling myself that I had enough. I picked a number and I was like, that is enough for now. That is enough for the long term. That changed my life as well. And it, like I said, it wouldn't have, if I had done the math and said, can I retire early on this number? I would have said no, but I did it the other way around, which was saying, I don't want to go back to work. Can I live on this number? And that answer was yes. And so those are just two different ways to look at the same financial equation, but to look at it and say like, where are you in your life? And for me, it was like not going back to work was really important to me because toxic. My job was so toxic. I was so tired. If I could never get another instruction from a penis holder again, like I just don't need y'all in my life. Take that somewhere else. I don't want your opinion. So, for everyone out there who's feeling burned out, there are other options. If you feel like fire is so far away and you might not, like your sanity might not be able to make it, I want you, whether that's with me, with someone else, I want you to think about what else you can do. You can reach me on IG. I'm on Instagram at Roshida D, and I'm on Facebook at Sheeta's on the Loose. And you can reach me at either place. I am happy to talk to anyone about this. Like I said, I coach people all the time. And I want to see more Black women feel free. You know, the rich aunt vibe is like a thing we were doing last year, but like, if you're not a happy rich aunt, if you just look like that on the gram, like that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're on. Like that's not, you need like, you got to back that up with the numbers and the mental freedom that comes like with those numbers. So that's me. I think that's it.
That's a whole word. Everything from being afraid to make this step, which I think if you're a planner, probably an over planner. If you are a stuff collector, I mean, I'm sitting around like all my stuff, like child. I did a minimalist challenge to start the year off to kind of cleanse. And so really looking at those steps. But I remember I attended your Exodus Summit last year, and someone said, create a date and stick to it. So, okay, if you're going to say a year from now, put it on your calendar and that's it. Like that is the go date. That is the date that you're going to make this stuff happen. Start getting rid of stuff, start plotting out where that location is going to be. Take into account that COVID might still be in existence and some people might not want us, which is the reality, unfortunately. But take care of yourself, because so many of us are dealing with more stress than we have to, taking on more responsibilities than we need to. And the whole point of financial independence is so you can do things on your term. And it might be that you work, it might be that you do a job that makes a quarter of what you make today, but just being in a situation where when you wake up in the morning, you don't hit the snooze like, oh my God, here we go again. So that's where we want you to be. I have dropped the links in the Facebook group. So So that's for the workshops that start on Wednesday. And the Instagram for Roshida is in there as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. Hopefully you'll attend a workshop or two and get a good idea in terms of residency. And then be sure to join us again next Monday at the same time. And I'll be updating the events tab for the upcoming event as well. I want to thank you, Sheeta, for joining us tonight and giving us your gems. And I want to thank everyone for attending with us. And we'll see you next Monday. Have a great night.
Thanks for having me.